The sun was setting over the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, casting a warm golden glow across the streets. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, and children played on sidewalks while parents chatted over white picket fences. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, or at least pretended to. 12-year-old Maya Johnson lived in one of the cozy homes nestled near the end of Oak Street. She was a bright, curious girl with a smile that could light up even the darkest room. Her father, Marcus Johnson, was a well-respected businessman who owned several shops downtown. Though he worked long hours, Marcus always made time for his family. He often said, "Family is everything." And no one embodied that more than Maya, who adored her dad and took pride in helping out around the house when she wasn't busy reading books or practicing her piano lessons. Maya had just returned from school that afternoon, her backpack slung casually over one shoulder as she hummed a tune under her breath. She waved to Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor, watering her garden before stepping inside her home. The smell of cinnamon cookies wafted through the kitchen, her mom's signature snack after a long day. But today, something felt different. There was an unusual tension in the air. As Maya set her bag down, she noticed a police cruiser parked outside their house. Two officers stood by the door talking to her father, their expressions serious. Marcus looked frustrated but composed, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Maya's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? Curiosity got the better of her, and she peeked out the window. That's when she saw it. A small group of people gathering across the street, whispering among themselves. Some pointed toward the house while others shook their heads disapprovingly. Maya didn't understand what all the fuss was about. Had someone broken into the neighborhood? Was there trouble nearby? Her confusion only grew when one of the officers turned toward her. His face was stern, almost cold, as if he'd already decided what he believed without hearing anyone else's side. "Sir," he said to Marcus, "we received reports about suspicious activity involving your daughter earlier today. We need to speak with her." Marcus frowned deeply. "My daughter?" he repeated, incredulous. "She's 12 years old. What exactly are you accusing her of?" Before Marcus could say anything further, another officer stepped forward. This one seemed younger, less confident, but equally determined to follow protocol. "It's standard procedure," he explained curtly. "We'll ask her a few questions. Clear things up quickly." Maya froze. Suspicious activity? Questions? None of this made sense. She hadn't done anything wrong, at least not that she could think of. All she'd done today was go to school, help a classmate find her lost notebook during recess, and walk home like usual. How could any of that lead to police showing up at her doorstep? Reluctantly, Maya joined her father and the officers in the living room. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down, clutching the hem of her sweater. The older officer wasted no time diving into his line of questioning, his tone sharp and impatient. Each word felt heavier than the last, pressing down on Maya until she couldn't breathe. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Neighbors exchanged glances, some shaking their heads sympathetically, others whispering judgmental remarks. Meanwhile, Marcus stood protectively beside his daughter, his jaw clenched tight. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't right, and he wasn't going to let them intimidate his child. Little did anyone know these events were about to spiral in ways no one expected. Karma, as they say, has a way of balancing the scales, even faster than you might think. The tension in the Johnson household thickened with every passing second. Maya sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her wide eyes darting between her father and the officers. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. She couldn't understand why they were accusing her of something, anything, when all she'd done that day was ordinary. Officer Grayson, the older and more authoritative of the two policemen, leaned forward slightly, his notebook in hand. "Miss Johnson," he began, his tone firm but not unkind, "we received a report earlier today about a young girl matching your description being seen near the entrance of Willow Creek Mall. Apparently, there was an incident involving shoplifting." Maya blinked in disbelief. "Shoplifting?" she echoed softly, her voice trembling. "But I wasn't even near the mall today." Marcus stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. "That's absurd," he said firmly, addressing the officers. "My daughter has been at school all day. You can verify her attendance if you need proof." The younger Officer Daniels, shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at his partner before speaking. "We're just following procedure, sir. Someone called it in. A witness claims they saw a girl wearing a red hoodie and jeans leaving the scene. We're obligated to investigate." Maya looked down at herself. She was wearing a red hoodie and jeans, but so did half the kids in her middle school. It wasn't exactly unique. Still, the coincidence made her stomach churn. Why would someone accuse her of something she didn't do? Officer Grayson continued, ignoring Marcus's growing frustration. "Can you tell us where you were around 3 p.m. this afternoon?" I was walking home from school," Maya stammered. "I left campus at 2:45 and it takes me about 15 minutes to get here. Ask anyone. They'll tell you I always take the same route." Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to keep her composure. This felt like some kind of nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Marcus crossed his arms tightly over his chest. "Enough," he said sharply. "You've questioned my daughter enough for now. If you want to dig deeper, talk to her teachers or check security footage, but don't sit here accusing her based on vague descriptions and hearsay." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Officer Grayson stood abruptly, snapping his notebook shut. "Fine," he said curtly. "But we'll need to bring her down to the station for further questioning. Standard protocol." "What?" Marcus exclaimed, his voice rising. "Absolutely not. She's 12 years old. Whatever issues you have with evidence, or lack thereof, you deal with them, without dragging my child into this circus." Despite Marcus's protests, Officer Grayson remained unmoved. "Sir, resisting will only make things worse. Your cooperation is essential." As the argument escalated, Maya felt smaller and smaller, shrinking into herself. Outside, the crowd had grown larger, murmuring among themselves. Some watched sympathetically while others whispered accusations under their breath. One neighbor, Mrs. Parker, shook her head disapprovingly. "Such a shame," she muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Kids these days, Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. How could people judge her without knowing the truth? She hadn't stolen anything. She knew right from wrong. Her parents had raised her better than that. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Officer Daniels intervened. "Look, maybe we can sort this out here," he suggested hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with how things were escalating. "If Miss Johnson agrees to answer a few more questions calmly, perhaps we won't need to involve the station." Marcus hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "But this ends now." Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. As the questioning resumed, she answered each question honestly, her voice shaking but clear. Slowly, cracks began to appear in the officers' assumptions. They asked about her whereabouts, her routine, even her friends, but everything she said checked out. Still, Officer Grayson seemed unwilling to let go. His demeanor grew colder by the minute, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that he'd already decided she was guilty, no matter what she said. Unbeknownst to everyone, however, fate was about to intervene. Just as Officer Grayson reached for his radio to request backup, a sharp knock echoed through the door. A delivery driver stood outside holding a package addressed to the Johnsons. What none of them realized yet was that this seemingly mundane interruption would change everything and expose truths none of them were prepared for. The sharp knock at the door broke the tense atmosphere inside the Johnson household. Everyone froze for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Marcus glanced toward the door, his expression hardening further as if he'd been interrupted during a critical moment. Reluctantly, he walked over and opened it, revealing a young delivery driver holding a small package. "Delivery for the Johnson residence," the man said, cheerfully, unaware of the storm brewing inside the house. He handed the package to Marcus with a polite nod before turning to leave. As soon as the door closed behind him, Marcus turned back to face the officers, his frustration evident. "What is this?" Officer Grayson asked curtly, eyeing the package suspiciously. Did you order something recently? Marcus sighed deeply, clutching the package tightly. No, I didn't. But that's none of your business right now. Let's focus on clearing my daughter's name instead of wasting time on irrelevant distractions. Despite Marcus's words, curiosity got the better of Maya. She stood up slowly and approached her father, her eyes fixed on the mysterious package. It was plain brown, wrapped in standard packing paper with no return address visible. Something about it felt off. Dad, maybe we should open it, she suggested hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. What if it's important? Marcus hesitated but eventually nodded. With careful hands, he tore open the packaging, revealing a small USB drive nestled inside. Attached to it was a folded note. The room fell silent as Marcus unfolded the paper and began reading aloud. To whom? It may concern I work at Willow Creek Mall and witnessed the events earlier today. Please find attached footage proving the innocence of the accused child. Justice deserves to prevail. A collective gasp filled the room. Even Officer Grayson couldn't hide his surprise as Marcus held up the note, his eyes narrowing with determination. Well? He demanded, looking directly at the officers. Are you going to ignore this evidence too? Officer Daniels stepped forward cautiously, reaching for the USB drive. We'll need to review this immediately, he said, his tone softer now. For the first time since arriving, he seemed genuinely concerned about getting to the truth. Grayson, however, remained skeptical. This could be a setup, he muttered under his breath, though no one paid much attention to him anymore. The mood in the room had shifted dramatically. Hope flickered in Maya's chest for the first time since the ordeal began. Marcus quickly connected the USB drive to his laptop, pulling up the video file stored on it. The footage showed grainy but clear images from a security camera near the mall entrance. In the clip, a teenage boy wearing a red hoodie and jeans hurriedly exited the building, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Moments later, the same boy dropped a stolen item into a nearby trash bin before disappearing down the street. Maya let out a shaky breath. That's not me, she whispered, pointing at the screen. That's not me. Her father placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Of course it isn't, he said firmly, glaring at the officers. Now can we put an end to this nonsense? Officer Daniels watched the video intently, his expression softening with each passing second. Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he admitted reluctantly. Based on this footage, it seems your daughter isn't involved after all. But Grayson wasn't ready to admit defeat just yet. He crossed his arms defiantly, his jaw tight. Even so, witnesses identified her. We can't ignore that. Before anyone could respond, another knock sounded at the door. This time, it was Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor, standing outside with a worried look on her face. Marcus, she said breathlessly, there's someone here asking questions about Maya. They're talking to the neighbors. Marcus frowned deeply, stepping outside to investigate. Sure enough, a man in plain clothes stood at the edge of their driveway, clipboard in hand, questioning passers-by. When Marcus confronted him, the man introduced himself as a private investigator hired by someone who wished to remain anonymous. I'm just doing my job, the investigator explained calmly. Someone reported seeing a girl matching your daughter's description acting suspiciously near the mall. I'm gathering information to confirm or deny those claims. Marcus clenched his fists, struggling to keep his temper in check. You're wasting your time, and ours. My daughter has already been cleared thanks to actual evidence. If whoever hired you wanted justice, they'd have come forward instead of hiding behind false accusations. The investigator nodded thoughtfully, jotting something down on his clipboard. I'll pass along your message, he said simply before walking away. Back inside, tensions simmered as the officers prepared to leave. But unbeknownst to everyone, Officer Grayson's stubborn refusal to accept the truth would soon come back, to haunt him in ways he never expected. Karma, as they say, works in mysterious ways, and its timing couldn't have been more perfect. As the officers finally left the Johnson household, the tension in the air began to lift, but only slightly. Maya sank back onto the couch, her legs feeling weak beneath her. Her father sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders protectively. Though the USB footage had proven her innocence, the weight of the ordeal lingered like a dark cloud. Over their home, outside, the crowd of neighbors slowly dispersed, some casting sympathetic glances toward the house while others whispered quietly among themselves. Mrs. Thompson stayed behind for a moment longer, patting Maya's hand gently. "You're a good girl, dear," she said kindly. "Don't let this get you down." Maya managed a small smile, though her heart still felt heavy. She knew not everyone believed she was innocent, and that thought hurt more than anything else. How could people think so little of her without knowing the truth? Meanwhile, Marcus paced the living room, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something about this whole situation wasn't right. Who had sent the anonymous USB drive? And why had someone gone through the trouble of framing his daughter in the first place? It didn't make sense. "Dad," Maya said softly, breaking him out of his thoughts. "Do you think they'll leave us alone now?" Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her, forcing a reassuring smile. "Of course they will, sweetheart. We have proof you didn't do anything wrong. But I won't rest until I find out who tried to ruin your reputation, and why." Just then, the phone rang, startling both of them. Marcus answered it hesitantly, bracing himself for bad news. To his surprise, it was Officer Daniels on the other end. His tone was apologetic as he explained that the department would be issuing a formal statement clearing Maya's name. "We're also looking into how such a mistake happened," he added. "I'm truly sorry for what you and your family have been through." Though Marcus appreciated the gesture, he couldn't help but feel skeptical. Apologies wouldn't undo the damage done tonight, or erase the fear Maya had endured. Still, he thanked the officer and hung up, turning to share the news with his daughter. But before he could say anything, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Detective Harris, a senior investigator from the precinct. Unlike Grayson or Daniels, Harris exuded calm professionalism. She introduced herself politely and asked if she could come in for a few minutes. Curious but cautious, Marcus invited her inside. Once seated, Harris wasted no time getting to the point. "Mr. Johnson, I've been assigned to review the case involving your daughter," she explained. "There are inconsistencies we need to address, not just regarding the investigation, but also concerning Officer Grayson's conduct." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Harris hesitated briefly before continuing. "The witness who identified your daughter admitted under questioning that they weren't entirely sure it was her. They claimed they saw a girl in a red hoodie, but when pressed, they couldn't provide any specific details. Additionally, Officer Grayson pushed forward with the accusation despite lacking substantial evidence." Maya listened intently, her eyes wide with disbelief. Someone had knowingly pointed fingers at her without being certain, and Grayson had willingly gone along with it. Her hands clenched into fists as anger bubbled inside her. Detective Harris noticed the emotion on Maya's face and softened her tone. "I understand this has been incredibly difficult for you and your family. Rest assured, we're taking this seriously. If misconduct is found, appropriate action will be taken." Though grateful for Harris's reassurance, Marcus remained guarded. "Thank you for coming by," he said diplomatically, "but I hope justice isn't delayed again. My daughter deserves better than this." After Harris left, the house fell silent once more. Maya stared out the window, watching the last remnants of daylight fade away. Despite the apology and promise of accountability, she couldn't shake the injustice of it all. Unbeknownst to them, however, karma was already setting its wheels in motion. Across town, Officer Grayson sat in his patrol car, fuming over the day's events. His pride refused to let him admit he'd made a mistake, and arrogance often comes at a cost. As he drove off into the night, oblivious to the storm brewing ahead, fate prepared to deliver a lesson neither he nor anyone else would soon forget. Officer Grayson's patrol car sped down the dimly lit streets of Maplewood, his frustration boiling over. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, muttering under his breath about entitled families and wasting department resources. To him, the Johnsons were nothing more than a nuisance, and clearing Maya's name felt like an insult to his authority. His ego refused to accept that he might have been wrong. As he turned onto a quieter road near the edge of town, Grayson noticed something unusual ahead. A group of teenagers gathered around a parked car. They seemed agitated, their voices rising, as they argued amongst themselves. Grayson sighed heavily, knowing it was his duty to investigate. Still seething from earlier, he pulled over with a screech of tires and stepped out of the vehicle. "What's going on here?" he barked, his tone sharp and commanding. The teenagers froze, startled by his sudden appearance. One of them, a lanky boy in a red hoodie, stepped forward nervously. "Nothing, officer," he stammered. "We were just talking." Grayson narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Something about the scene didn't sit right with him. The boy's hoodie caught his attention immediately. It looked eerily similar to the one described in the mall incident earlier that day. Could this be the real culprit? A surge of vindication coursed through him as he approached the group. "Let me see inside that car," Grayson demanded, pointing at the vehicle behind them. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances but complied, opening the doors hesitantly. Inside, Grayson found a duffel bag stuffed with stolen items, electronics, watches, and other valuables clearly taken from local stores. His lips curled into a smug grin. This was exactly what he needed to salvage his reputation after the mess with Maya. "You're all under arrest," he declared triumphantly, pulling out his handcuffs. But just as he reached for the first teenager, chaos erupted. The boy in the red hoodie bolted, shoving past Grayson and sprinting into the night. The others followed suit, scattering in different directions. Caught off guard, Grayson stumbled, before giving chase. The pursuit led him deep into an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of town. Shadows loomed large as moonlight filtered through broken windows and crumbling walls. Grayson's confidence began to waver. The once familiar streets had transformed into a labyrinth of danger. His radio crackled faintly, but static drowned out any hope of backup arriving quickly. Suddenly he heard footsteps echoing behind him. Whirling around, he saw no one. His heart pounded in his chest as he called out, "Who's there? Show yourself." Oh, low chuckle answered him instead, sending chills down his spine. From the darkness emerged the boy in the red hoodie, flanked by two older figures whose faces were obscured by hoods. Their presence radiated menace, and Grayson instinctively reached for his baton. But before he could react, one of the figures lunged forward, disarming him with surprising speed. "What do you want?" Grayson growled, trying to mask his fear with bravado. The leader of the group stepped closer, revealing a sly smile. "You've been accusing the wrong people tonight, officer," he said mockingly. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before jumping to conclusions." Before Grayson could respond, the teenagers vanished into the shadows, leaving him alone and weaponless in the eerie silence. For the first time in years, Officer Grayson felt truly powerless and utterly humiliated. Back at the Johnson household, Marcus and Maya sat together in the living room, discussing the events of the evening. Though relieved that the truth had come to light, Maya couldn't shake the lingering unease. "Dad?" she asked hesitantly. "Do you think Officer Grayson will ever admit he was wrong?" Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples thoughtfully. "Some people are too proud to apologize, sweetheart. But karma has a way of teaching lessons when we least expect it." Little did they know, karma was already hard at work. Across town, Grayson trudged back to his patrol car, battered and defeated. His earlier arrogance had blinded him to the consequences of his actions, and now those consequences were beginning to unfold in ways he couldn't escape. The next morning, news of the previous night's events spread quickly through Maplewood. Officer Grayson's encounter with the teenagers, and his subsequent humiliation, had not gone unnoticed. A few bystanders had recorded parts of the chase on their phones, and by sunrise, snippets of the video were circulating online. Social media buzzed with reactions, ranging from shock to outrage. Many residents expressed sympathy for Maya Johnson, while others criticized Grayson's handling of the situation. At the police station, tensions ran high. Detective Harris called an emergency meeting with the precinct's senior officers to address the growing scandal. "This isn't just about One officer making a mistake, she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. It's about accountability. If we don't handle this properly, it will damage the trust our community has in us. Meanwhile, Grayson sat slumped at his desk, staring blankly at the wall. His colleagues avoided eye contact, whispering amongst themselves about his reckless behavior. Some felt sorry for him, knowing how pride could cloud judgment, but most agreed he'd brought this upon himself. When summoned to the captain's office, Grayson walked in with a mix of defiance and dread. Captain Reynolds wasted no time cutting to the chase. "Grayson, your conduct last night was unacceptable," he said sternly. "Not only did you mishandle the Johnson case, but your actions during the pursuit put yourself and others in danger. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full investigation." Grayson opened his mouth to protest, but Reynolds held up a hand to silence him. "Save it. You've left me no choice. We can't afford another misstep, not after everything that's happened." As Grayson left the office, shoulders slumped in defeat, whispers followed him down the hallway. He couldn't believe this was happening. How had things spiraled so out of control? All he'd done was try to do his job, or so he told himself. But deep down, he knew his arrogance had blinded him to the truth. Back at the Johnson household, life slowly began returning to normal. Marcus received a formal apology from the police department, along with assurances that steps would be taken to prevent similar incidents in the future. Though grateful, Marcus remained wary. "Words are cheap," he told Maya over breakfast. "What matters is action." Maya nodded thoughtfully, picking at her cereal. Despite the resolution, she still felt uneasy. She hadn't asked for any of this attention, and the thought of being judged based on appearances lingered in her mind. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think people will ever stop assuming things about me?" Marcus set down his coffee mug and looked at her with warmth in his eyes. "People will always have opinions, sweetheart, but what defines you isn't what others say, it's how you carry yourself. And I'm proud of the way you handled everything." Later that day, Maya decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was her way of reclaiming a sense of normalcy after days filled with chaos. As she strolled past familiar houses, she noticed something unexpected: small acts of kindness everywhere. Mrs. Thompson waved warmly from her porch, offering a plate of cookies. Another neighbor stopped to thank her for staying strong during such a tough time. These moments reminded Maya that not everyone had judged her unfairly. There were good people in Maplewood who cared, even if they hadn't spoken up earlier. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel hopeful, but karma wasn't done yet. Across town, Officer Grayson returned home, his suspension weighing heavily on him. As he turned on the local news, a breaking story caught his attention. Footage of the stolen goods found in the teenager's car had been released, along with interviews from witnesses who confirmed seeing them near the mall. The same witnesses admitted they'd hesitated to come forward earlier due to fear of retaliation. Grayson watched silently as the pieces fell into place. The real culprits had been identified, and justice was finally being served. For everyone, except him. In that moment, he realized the full weight of his mistakes. Karma had struck hard, exposing not only the truth but also the flaws within himself. The days that followed brought a mix of closure and reflection for the residents of Maplewood. For Maya Johnson, life began to settle into a rhythm she recognized. Again, quiet mornings spent reading, afternoons practicing piano, and evenings laughing with her family over dinner. Yet, despite the return to normalcy, the events of the past week had left an indelible mark on her. She carried herself differently now, with a quiet strength born from standing up against injustice. At school, things were changing too. Word had spread about what happened, and while some kids still whispered behind her back, many others approached her with kindness. One classmate, Emma, even apologized for believing the rumors. "I should have known better," Emma admitted sheepishly. "You've always been one of the nicest people I know." Maya smiled softly, touched by the gesture. "It's okay," she replied. "What matters is that we learn from it." The experience taught her the importance of speaking out, not just for herself but for others who might face similar challenges. She decided to join a local youth group focused on promoting fairness and understanding in their community. If anything, this ordeal had shown her the power of standing together. Meanwhile, Officer Grayson's suspension became public knowledge, sparking heated debates across town. Some defended him, arguing that mistakes happen in high-pressure jobs. Others saw it as long overdue accountability for someone who let bias cloud his judgment. Detective Harris took the opportunity to host a series of workshops within the police department, emphasizing the need for empathy and integrity in law enforcement. Slowly but surely, changes were implemented to ensure no child or adult would ever be treated so unfairly again. For Grayson, however, the road ahead was far less forgiving. Stripped of his badge and grappling with shame, he found himself isolated from colleagues and friends alike. His once unshakable confidence crumbled under the weight of self-reflection. Late at night, he replayed the events in his mind. The accusations against Maya, the reckless pursuit, the mocking laughter of the teenagers. Each memory served as a reminder of how far he'd fallen. One evening, unable to bear the silence of his empty apartment, Grayson went for a walk through the very neighborhood where everything had unraveled. As he passed the Johnson house, he paused, hesitating before stepping onto the driveway. He knocked gently on the door, unsure if anyone would answer or care to listen. Marcus opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. "Grayson," he said cautiously. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to apologize," Grayson stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, "to both you and your daughter. I was wrong. About everything. And I'm sorry." For a moment, Marcus simply stared at him, weighing the sincerity of his words. Then, stepping aside, he gestured for Grayson to come in. Maya sat on the couch, startled by the unexpected visitor, but she listened quietly as Grayson poured out his regrets. It wasn't easy for him to admit his faults, but seeing the pain in Maya's eyes made him realize the depth of the harm he'd caused. When he finished, there was a long pause. Finally, Maya spoke. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "It means a lot." Her words weren't an absolution. They couldn't erase what had happened, but they offered a glimmer of hope. For the first time in weeks, Grayson felt a small measure of peace. Perhaps redemption was possible, though it would take time and effort to rebuild trust. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting its golden light across the streets once more, the town seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Justice had been served, not just for Maya, but for everyone affected by the ripple effects of that fateful day. Karma, as unpredictable as it was inevitable, had delivered its lesson in full. And Maya? She stood on her porch, watching the horizon, ready to embrace whatever came next. After all, every new beginning starts with forgiveness and courage. This final part ties up loose ends, offering resolution and growth for both Maya and Grayson, while leaving readers with a hopeful message about resilience and change. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments.